Friends, welcome to Monday. I am back with chapter 11 of Pugs of the Frozen North. When we left off on Friday, Sika and Shen had escaped from the mind control Yetis, but they were back in last place. Let's see if they can gain the lead. Chapter 11. The days that followed really weren't days at all. Sunrise was just a faint silvering of light upon the southern sky. The pugs ran north as fast as their 264 little legs could carry them, following the tracks of the other sleds. There are 50 different types of snow in true winter, and Shen and Sika had soon seen nearly all of them. They crossed paths of blind snow and patches of echo snow. They plunged through warbling drifts of song snow and screaming mounds of screech snow. They crossed a broad, rolling plain of slumber snow, which snored and mumbled and farted like someone asleep under a huge white comforter. Helga and the rest were so far ahead now that it barely seemed worth going on. How could Sika and Shen hope to reach the North Pole first? But Sika said they had to try. Maybe the other sleds will all drop out, she said, or hit a patch of shrink snow and be miniaturized, or a patch of stone snow and be turned into statues. After that, Shen kept a lookout for statues and miniature sleds, but he didn't see any, just the tracks of the other racers, leading endlessly on over the horizon. They came to a waste of were snow, which kept shaping itself into snowmen when they weren't looking. They would stop the sled for a while to look at the compass or cook food on their camping stove and look up to find that they were surrounded by a ring of snowmen. And these weren't nice snowmen with scarves and carrots for noses. Oh no, these were horrible snowmen with sharp, icy teeth and frozen claws and open, hungry mouths. So here's some of the things they saw on their trip. Oh, this page is just pictures of all of these angry snowmen that were surrounding them. It was all very unsettling. Before long, Shen and Sika were so tired of being unsettled that they almost thought of turning back. But the pugs weren't frightened of this were snow, not even when it tried forming itself into a scary snow dog. The pugs just yipped at them, and eventually some of the braver ones started biting the snowmen's snowy bottoms. After that, the were snow stopped its tricks, though Shen and Sika could still feel it sulking at them as they sped on into the north. But there was not a lot of north left to speed on to now. Pretty soon they would reach the top of the world, from where, whichever way you go, you're going south. As the last silver smear of the short day faded behind them, they saw something glinting and glittering far ahead. It was the northern lights reflecting on the frosty spires of the Snowfather's palace. "We've done it," said Sika. "We're nearly there." "But I bet one of the others has already gotten there," Shen said. He thought that if he kept saying that, it would not be so disappointing if they found out that Helga Shackleton-Jones or Sir Basil was already there. But he could not help hoping secretly that Sika was right. They could still be first if only something had delayed the other racers. After a little while longer, when they had crossed a particularly smelly patch of stink snow, they found that something had. The Snowfather's palace was not far off now. They could see it sitting there on the horizon like a gigantic, beautiful igloo. But between them and the palace was a deep chasm. The chasm's wall seemed to reach all the way down to the floor of the sea. Across the chasm, like a web of lace, there stretched a maze of snow bridges. "It's beautiful," said Shen. "But I'm not sure it can take our weight," said Sika. You can see these bridges. Very slowly, very carefully, they steered the sled onto one of the bridges. It trembled and creaked, and chunks of snow dropped from its underside and tumbled down into the shadows at the bottom of the abyss. Shen peered down after them and saw spiky white shapes moving down there, snow trolls waiting to eat anything that fell. "Help!" cried a voice, echoing between the leaping arcs and tall, spindly pillars of the snow. The northern lights were pulsing brightly overhead, and by their glow the children saw Helga Hammerfest. Poor Helga! She had done her best to stick to the thickest bridges, but even so her mighty bog oak sled had been too heavy. The middle of one of the bridges had dropped out as she tried to cross it, Her polar bears, Snowdrop and Slush Puppy, sat unhappily on the far side of the gap, the sled, which was still attached to them, dangling in midair above the chasm. Helga dangled from the stern post of the sled. So here are Helga's bears kind of hanging on right there, and then she is falling down. She had tied herself onto it with her beard. From time to time, Snowdrop and Slush Puppy scrambled to their feet and tried to heave the sled up. It would rise a few feet, but it was too heavy for them to drag back onto the bridge. Each time they tried, more snow fell from the bridge, spattering Helga and her sled, and then tumbling down into the depths. Shen and Sika looked at each other. It would have been easy to keep going, but they could not leave Helga hanging there. "Mush!" shouted Shen, and the pugs surged. Shen and Sika's sled was so much lighter than Helga's, and the pugs were so much lighter than the polar bears, that even the flimsiest of bridges could hold them. They threaded their way across the maze until they were on the part of the broken bridge where Snowdrop and Slush Puppy sat. "Thank you, children," Helga shouted from down the blue depths of the canyon. "Please cut my poor polar bears loose. They're getting tired, and I don't want them to fall along with me." "No," called Shen, "we're going to pull you up." "Boo!" shouted the snow trolls down in the shadows below. They had been looking forward to Helga falling so that they could eat her. They started hurling big splinters of ice up at the bridge, hoping to dislodge her before Shen and Sika could save her. But the abyss was deep and the trolls were horrible throwers, and the shards all fell back harmlessly. She then unhitched the pugs from Sika's sled and tying their leashes to Snowdrop's and Slush Puppy's harnesses. The polar bears sniffed curiously at their new teammates. If they had been hungry, they could have eaten the 66 little dogs in 66 big bites. But then had Sika and Shen for dessert. But they were unusually well-trained polar bears, and they seemed to understand that Shen and Sika and the small yipping creatures were there to help. It took a while, but eventually all the pugs were attached. "Mush!" shouted Sika. The pugs strained forward, pulling the polar bears. The polar bears strained forward, pulling the dangling sled. Inch by inch it rose until it was jammed against the crumbling end of the broken snow bridge. Then Helga untied her beard and scrambled up the sled as if it were a ladder. Gasping and panting, she heaved herself onto the bridge. The exhausted pugs relaxed, and then the sled dropped again, dragging the polar bears and the pugs back with it. Just in time, Helga pulled a big knife from under her furs and slashed. Here in this illustration, it's kind of hard to see, but the pugs are pulling the polar bears and Helga up and slashed through Snowdrop's and Slush Puppy's harnesses. The sled dropped silently for a long time, and then, from far below, they heard the deep, echoey crash as it smashed to pieces in the bottom of the chasm. "Boo!" and "Spoil sports!" bellowed the trolls, annoyed that nobody had been on it when it fell. It seemed wrong to leave Helga behind, even though she had left them behind back at the Lost Hope. So they made her sit with Shen on the sled, and Sika went ahead and tested the snow bridges with a stick, while Snowdrop and Slush Puppy walked behind. And they had not gone far when they heard another voice calling, "Help!" Shackleton Jones had had the opposite trouble. He had chosen to cross the maze by the fastest route, across the thinnest and most fragile bridges. He was sure that his super lightweight sled would not collapse. But he had forgotten that the pink huskies that were pulling it weighed more than the robot dogs he had left behind. The frailest of the bridges had crumbled beneath the pink dogs' paws, and now they hung from their harnesses with only the weight of the sled, Shackleton, and Snowbot to stop them from falling into the chasm. Below them, more hungry trolls were piling up a tower of snow to try and reach the dangling dogs. "Can you help us, please?" the scientist shouted when he saw Shen and Sika's sled passing. "I can't cut these poor doggies loose." The troll's tower was almost tall enough by the time the racers reached him. A troll climbed to the top of it and, standing on tiptoe, managed to grab the pink pom-pom of one of the dog's tails. Then it was snatched out of his hand as Shen, Sika, and Helga all helped Shackleton and Snowbot heave the dogs back onto the bridge. "Spoil sports!" shouted the trolls. You can see here that his pink husky hanging and the trolls trying to get him. Shen and Sika went on their way with Shackleton Jones following. Once or twice he eyed the maze ahead as if he was thinking about ways to get past the children and beat them to the Snow Father's palace. But Helga said, "Don't even think about it. That's twice those kids have saved us." Soon they were nearing the far side of the canyon, and there ahead of them, going fully across one final bridge, was the sled of Sir Basil Sprout Dumpling. See if they can overtake their last competitor tomorrow.